All right. I think we are somewhat live. I've been led to believe that I was introduced before, and so no need to do another introduction. Thank you for the thumbs up, very helpful. And just I'll add my own very quick introduction. I worked in the data analytics industry for many years, and one of the questions that came up in the Q&A during the first session asked the question, is this all just buzzwords and hype and the latest marketing thing, or is there something really new going on here? And having worked in this industry for a long time, it's my conjecture that there really is something new and interesting going on as it relates to data products. And the very quick version of why, I'm going to get into this in a second, is we've largely solved the data storage problem, and we've largely solved the data consumption problem, analysis and visualization problem. The challenge sits in between these two layers, where people don't trust the data that's flowing from these really high quality storage systems into these really easy to use consumption endpoints. And that's why I believe data products represent something very interesting. Over the course of this presentation, I want to touch on a couple of the key things that Wayne asked when he kicked off. And one of the things he talked about right up at the beginning is one of the number one challenges that everybody's talking about when it comes to data products is, what are these things? What's the definition of a data product? The second thing on the list was, how do you create them? And what does that mean? And I'm going to get into that into the next set of slides right after this. But starting with the definition, this is the definition that we use consistently when we talk to customers and users about a data product. So data product is a consumption-ready set of high-quality, trustworthy, accessible data that people use to make decisions or to solve their business challenges. And there's a couple of really important ideas in here. The first is this focus on consumption-ready data. So rather than thinking about trying to manage the mess of source data, really focus your data product initiatives and energy on the consumption-ready data, the data that sits at the point of decision. The second sort of important idea here is a focus on quality, trustworthiness, and accessibility. Again, Wayne sort of pointed to this with things like governance councils and things like that. We think there's some technical solutions to some of these challenges as well, which we'll get into, but really focus on quality as an outcome. And then this idea that many people should be accessing and using this. This is a really kind of key idea behind data products. And someone else in the comments in the first session, the Wayne session, asked the question, how much of this is traditional data product management or digital product management techniques just applied to data? And I think that's actually a very insightful question. And I think it's exactly right that a lot of the things we're talking about here are really applying really traditional product management techniques to data. So I talked about this a little bit a second ago. The challenge on the data side, if you think about this as consumption and then sources, on the sources side, the challenge has never been more acute. We used to have this idea, maybe in the 90s or 2000s, that the world of data was going to solve itself because all of your enterprise data was going to end up in your data lake or your data warehouse, and then there'd be a singular reporting tool that everyone would access. And whatever dreams we had of this architecture becoming a reality have been blown away. The reality inside most organizations, the modern sort of data architecture that most of you are working with, is you have many hundreds of sources and systems, and you keep adding sources and systems because you're looking to optimize those operational systems that your users are using. Sure, they're ending up inside these cloud data warehouses, but now they're being consumed by a myriad of different consumption endpoints. So every day it feels like there's a new way of accessing that data to get value out of that data. And the reason this is, the pressure this puts on the system is that we need to get more from the data that we're tracking and managing as an organization. We're putting a lot higher or heavier requirements on that data. It really needs to be as clean and standardized as possible. Typically, you're looking for a lot of attributes because you want to have a lot of dimensions and measures in your analysis. You wish you could bring this together to get a single view of that customer or the supplier or whatever the entity that matters to you is. And then inevitably, when there are challenges and the problems in that data, you want a way of providing that feedback into the system. So, and problems become only more acute when we think about building models or AI models on top of this data. We talk about model hallucination. I've done an entire session on this a couple of weeks ago. This idea that when you have data that's of poor quality or has embedded biases, and then you build models on that, you can actually introduce and amplify those biases or those hallucinations inside your processes, and that's a terrible thing. So the quality and the cleanliness of the data has really never been more important. And then if you think about the teams of people that are working to solve this problem, your data teams, many of you are probably either managing these data teams, or thinking about building these data teams. They simply can't keep up. There's too much work for folks to do. And in a way, there's this really difficult challenge, which is the data teams are working really hard, but decision makers are frustrated with the speed and quality that they're getting out of these data teams. So it's sort of like the customer's upset and the supplier can't keep up. And they really want this asset that you have, which is this high quality data, but they really can't get it. They can't get it at pace. So if we look at how people are trying to solve this problem and how data teams work today, they typically work on a use case approach. That is to say, they go project by project and they try to build in a sense, a custom set of data for each request. And so someone comes along and they says, hey, I really would like to have a sales forecast. And somebody goes and builds a pipeline that connects together a whole series of sources and delivers that sales forecast. And then, of course, inevitably, it's not right. So there's feedback that comes in, but that feedback is single-channeled between the user of that data and the product person or the person on the data team who built it. And then we repeat this process across every single request, and it becomes unmanageable and becomes spaghetti code. So you have hundreds of pipelines that are overlapping. A bug in one gets propagated through hundreds. When you go to fix something, you have to fix it in 38 places. It's a bit of a disaster. Instead, if we can think about managing this as a product, you can think about these core entities that matter to you as a business. Who are my customers? Who are my suppliers? What products do we sell? Who are the employees that work at our organization? And build products around those key entities. And the value here, of course, is this drives reusability. So when you focus at an entity level and you think about these key entities that matter, then you can start building these analyses off of them, the sales forecast, the territory planning analysis, whatever it might be. And by building this at an entity level, you can now consolidate the feedback across all of these different data products. And so you move away from this model of one-off pipeline creation to working at an entity level. So now, how we achieve this, like what's the best practice for solving this problem? The challenge in our industry, of course, is there really seem to be only two solutions to solving this problem. One is we build bigger and bigger teams. We throw people at the problem. So we have many different source systems. They're unresolved. You can't look at that by an entity. So how do we solve the problem? I would joke this is spreadsheets and VLOOKUP. It's like, we dump the data in a spreadsheet and we spend hours trying to manually reconcile a bunch of different systems, look at the data, figure out where there's standardization and quality problems and fix them up manually. Or the other solution we see is what I call lock it down, which is if we just never changed our data, then everything would be okay, right? So we've put in place an MDM system, a master data system, and we tell everyone in the organization, no one is allowed to create data unless it conforms to this central system. And there's this line in Jurassic Park that says, life will find a way. I have the same feeling about data will find a way. So when you lock it down, in these top-down governance systems, inevitably what happens is data squirts out the side. Data will find a way to avoid those systems. And so in a way, this introduces what I think is the most important thing to take away from this presentation and conversation, which is there is a solution to this conundrum. Either had to throw people at the problem or lock it down. And that is AI. And this is the unlock that breaks the dilemma of the data product challenge. And the idea here, in a way, is deceptively simple, which is as human beings, we're really good at these common data management tasks. If I show you IBM and International Business Machines, or IBM, Inc. and IBM, you recognize intuitively that those are the same things. If I show you 415 555 234 and +1 415, you intuitively know that's the same phone number, and you would be able to fix one up to look like the other. It turns out that computers are terrible at this task, or traditionally programmed computers are terrible at this task. And however, AI is really good at these tasks. And so we can train AI models to get really good at common data management tasks. And that allows you to break this trade-off between throwing people at the problem and locking it down. It allows you to have the flexibility of a data product approach without having to build teams of hundreds or thousands of people sort of manually working through the data. So this AI approach, sort of the way to think about this is think about all of the tasks that you, your team, do to manage data. And then think about how many of those tasks really require deep human intellect. Most of them are fairly rudimentary tasks, but they're very difficult to program. If I asked you to program those tasks, say in Python, you would find yourself with 100 nested if-then rules trying to sort of make that work. Again, these are perfect tasks to hand to AI. And so things like validation and cleaning, relationships between records, things that are the same versus different, enriching sparse data, so finding examples that allow you to fill in missing phone numbers or missing email addresses, that sort of stuff. And it benefits from this human-in-the-loop feedback so that you can get human guidance into the system. So maybe just to sort of step back a second here before I get into a bit more detail. Again, the simple idea here is the unlock for successful data products is AI. This is what allows you to get the flexibility your organization is demanding while keeping governance and security at the center of the challenge. So, no surprise, Tamr is building such a platform for doing this with AI at the center. The idea behind the Tamr platform is to allow you to manage data at an entity level, use AI to resolve data together into those common entities, and then attach a set of platform services together. Feedback and metrics, allow you to search that data, look at how that data has shifted and changed over time, and provide access to the data. And the benefit of this, of course, is that it breaks this trade-off and allows your data teams, to support more use cases without having to throw hundreds or thousands of people at the problem, with predictability and sort of stay on top of your work smarter, and at the same time give the business teams what they want, which is frankly answers to their questions and the ability to sort of work with this incredibly valuable asset that sits at the center of most organizations, which is their data. So let me walk through in the last few minutes a couple of sort of examples of the challenges that we've seen at a practical level in using this technology, and then the architectures that our customers put in place to solve those. So one challenge we talked about is aggregating disparate sources. You have data, say in this example, from SAP, Salesforce, Excel. You, as a human, can see that these data are all really the same person. It's Andrew Wyatt, otherwise AKA AJ Wyatt or Andy Wyatt. You see that. The computer doesn't see that. And there's no key relationship here. There's no ID which links these together, or which they are ID, if you don't link them. And that's that is a big challenge. Second challenge is the false trade-off between integrating data and integrating systems. So the other strategy you might take here is like, well, we'll just use a data integration platform and literally wire these systems together manually. Or we're going to use a data movement tool and copy data from one place to the other. The architecture that we've seen in place with a handful of customers as it relates to this is to use the cloud data warehouse as a kind of central repository that becomes the landing zone for all of these different sources. And what's really valuable about this is that those typically have many different interfaces, different API endpoints that allow you to use streaming and direct copy and paste to queries, et cetera, to be able to land data in this example from a customer, BigQuery. And it's at this point that we can take advantage of Tamr to run the AI, resolve the entities at that layer, and drop a new table, which is the resolved entity at that point. And that becomes available to these consumption endpoints. Another example of this is our customer Novacure. They've been using Fivetran to move data into BigQuery. And they use MuleSoft to move back the cleansed, in their case, HCP and HCO healthcare providers and organizations back into, in their case, SAP, while retaining these consumption endpoints of Viva, where they're able to then update records there. But they use Google BigQuery with Tamr cleaning the data there as that central repository of, in their case, healthcare providers. Lastly, and I'm running low on time, how we think about system consolidation. So we have a range of different systems, and we want to sort of bring those together and give people this single version. Mutual had this challenge. They put in place their own MDM system and a set of legacy MDM systems. They actually had 3 MDM systems across the business. And they wanted to switch over to a new system of record. They've been using Tamr in that context as a real-time system of record for policies, claims, and customers in their case. And again, you see this common architecture here where you have many sources on the left and many consumption endpoints on the right. So let me leave you with a couple of key takeaways, things that you can hopefully use as you begin or continue your data product journey. And the first, which is where I started, is really think deeply about the outcomes and consumption endpoints. Start the conversation from the user back as opposed to the source and system out. This is again, if you think about this using the product analogy, rather than deciding what technology you want to build a product in and then build the product, think about what problem your customer has, your user has, and then engineer the technology that best supports that solution. Very similar in the context of this data. In that same spirit, the human interfaces for these data products are much more important than pipeline. Or to say it in a funny way, you can compromise on the pipeline, don't compromise on making it an easy to use and accessible human interface. This came up in the first session, but this idea of iteration and using Agile to build the sort of minimum viable first start is a really valuable strategy for making data products successful. Going dark for 6 months and then delivering perfection is actually much worse than spending a week delivering something of value and iterating over 6 months. You end up in a much better place. And then this distinction between build and buy, I would argue, is a false one. You're going to do a bit of both. And so recognizing that up front is a really useful trick, as it were. So that I did in the resources section on the left, I dropped a couple links. I normally would have shown you a demo, but you can go do your own demo by going to our homepage. We have a couple of live demos on the homepage. One you can just click through, and one where you can actually register, and we'll give you access to a system. Also, I'm shamelessly plugging my Data Masters podcast, so you can go check that out. And there's actually a really an ebook on data products we just published, which I would encourage anyone to take a look at and read.